Hi guys, welcome to my newest video. You might have noticed a change around here. I've had a bit of a rebrand on the channel. I've moved from Pixel Perfect mode to Top Deck Wizard, mostly to reflect the fact that pretty much all of my content now is based around Star Wars Unlimited and trading card games. I've actually made another channel called Pixel Perfect Mode and I'm using the same logo on that channel. And in the future I do plan to make more videos about retro video games and things like that. But for now I'm just so focused on Star Wars Unlimited and I can't see that changing in the foreseeable future, especially with the release of Set 2 coming out later this year, that I just think there's basically an unending amount of things that I can talk about basically going forwards. So this channel from now on is going to be just dedicated to currently Star Wars Unlimited, in the future possibly other trading card games, things like Magic the Gathering and Hearthstone, which are games that I've played in the past. But yeah, so today's video is going to be talking about 5 mechanics or new things that I'd like to see in the future of Star Wars Unlimited. And we'll just jump straight into it, starting with number 1, leaders that can deploy into the space arena. Currently every leader in the game deploys into the ground arena, but what if in the next set we had leaders that could deploy into the space arena? I'm thinking it could be characters that we know fly certain ships. I think it's going to be less likely we'll see leaders who already have cards. My first thought was Luke in Red 5, or Hera in Ghost, Han in the Falcon. Some of those are like the most obvious ones that we could see. But maybe instead we could see characters that we're yet to have in the game, like Jango Fett in Firespray. I don't necessarily think that these are going to be happening in Set 2, but I think, this video is more talking about generally in the future of Star Wars Unlimited. I could see this happening. They could also, on the cards, when they deploy into the Space Arena, they could have abilities that synergize with ships, specifically like increasing the damage of ships, like Raid 1 for all of your vehicles or space units, for example. So yeah, I think that would be really interesting. I think so far in the game, I think it's fair to say the most used arena has definitely been the ground arena, with only 1 or 2 decks really focusing on ships. I think they've not been very successful either. I'm thinking more of like the Thrawn control deck, which uses Entrenched, is probably the only space deck that I've used that works. Pulling in leaders as space units might give that side of the game a little bit of a boost and be something quite interesting in the future. Number 2, we have expanded base abilities. So currently, obviously, we only have 4 bases that have an ability of their own, 1 in each colour. So I imagine in Set 2, I will have 4 more, and in Set 3, maybe 4 more. Obviously, they might change that cadence, but I'm guessing that's how it's going to work. Over time, I think we could see some really interesting abilities that could sort of alter the way that we build our decks. Because if you think about it, bases are a fundamental aspect of building decks, excuse the pun. They are your second colour, essentially. So I'm thinking things like they could release a base with 35 health or 40 health, but instead of giving you a buff, it could give you a passive debuff. Something like on the first turn you're not allowed to play a card, or you have to have a 60 card deck, so it's a little bit less consistent. Some of those may be a bit too much, but something that's a slight drawback, but not something that's going to lose you the game. Obviously, the current bases have much more basic abilities. I imagine as the game develops and we have new abilities and things like that, they'll get more complicated. On that topic, number 3, new keywords or card abilities and expansions of the old ones. So I'm kind of cheating here, there's multiple things in this section. So far in the game we've had quite a few abilities on keywords. Off the top of my head, there's Overwhelm, Saboteur, Sentinel, Restore, Grit, When Defeated. Based on my past experience with TCGs, there's going to be loads more that they can think of basically. And there are some which we kind of have slightly in the game but don't have a specific keyword. I'm thinking of Sabine, the unit. She essentially has stealth, where she can't be targeted, but it's not listed as a keyword on her card basically. It's a conditional thing. And then I think we're obviously going to see an expansion of the old keywords. Currently some of the keywords are much more prevalent than others. I think Restore is one that's on quite a lot of cards, and Sentinel is obviously quite prevalent as well. But some like Grit and When Defeated, there aren't that many cards with those abilities, and the ones that aren't particularly strong. Number 4, Expanded Universe. So what do I mean by that? This one is talking more about the lore and the theme of the game. Obviously with Star Wars there's an almost endless sort of treasure trove of lore and characters to pull from for the sets. There are films, books, comics, TV shows, video games. I imagine that for a while everything's going to be pulled from the Disney canon, from the main movies, from the TV shows, that kind of thing. But in the future what I'd like to see is them delve into the expanded universe. There have been hints of it already with the artwork and things like that, but imagine if we had some really fringe expanded universe characters, things like Kyle-Katarn or HK-47, people from old video games like Dash Rendar, that kind of thing. Obviously the health of the game is important and we want it to keep going for years and years and years, so they're going to need to eventually sort of look outside the usual avenues and try and find these characters. Another really cool one would be Darth Nihilus from Knights of the Old Republic 2. I'd really enjoy seeing him in the game. The other thing to consider is the fact that there can be multiple versions of the same character. So whilst we have a Luke Skywalker who is from Empire Strikes Back, we can have Farm Luke, we can have Return of the Jedi Luke, we can have grouchy old Luke sitting on a rock kind of thing. Personally, I'm really looking forward to the Bad Batch coming in the next set, and I really want to see more Clone Wars stuff, as that's my favourite era of Star Wars. And lastly, number 5, new deck archetypes. I'm thinking specifically of combo and mill decks. So what do I mean when I say a mill deck? A mill deck is a deck which is specifically designed to exhaust your opponent of resources, usually through discarding cards from deck and also from hand, but mostly from the deck. We do currently have a few cards in the game which synergize with this strategy. The most obvious one being Vigilance, which lets you discard 6 cards from an opponent's deck. With a few others, and they're all focused on the blue colour. Kanan discards cards from the opponent's deck. Yoda has a little bit of this kind of flavour because on defeat you can make your opponent draw a card. I'm not sure if FFG will support this strategy fully going forwards. It's a bit of a niche strategy, but it's always been one of my favourite ways to play just because it's so ridiculous and so janky. Very rarely in trading card games is mill, one of the best decks, and you don't really want it to be one of the best decks, but it's nice to have it as an option just to play for fun. And then combo decks. What do I mean by combo decks? There are different kinds of combo decks, but they all they all have something in common. They want to combine cards together to win the game. You want to ignore what your opponent's doing, you focus on your own game plan, which usually involves getting together a bunch of cards and then killing your opponent, either from hand or on board, usually from hand. A good example, and I think an interesting idea that I had for a combo deck would be something like the Death Star. So at the start of the game, you put the Death Star into your deck, and it consists of, maybe let's say 4 or 5 cards, which are like parts of the Death Star. And then you have to build the Death Star throughout the game by playing them down on the board, and your opponent can't interact with it. And then if you manage to build all of the Death Star together in 4 or 5 cards, and then you can use an action on the Death Star and destroy your opponent's base. So a kind of Exodia style thing, if you've ever played Yu-Gi-Oh, that kind of thing. That's about it for this video. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned, I've got more Star Wars Unlimited content coming.